Today's video is all about Cabernet Sauvignon. I'll take 5 examples that are distinctly different from one another. I'll discuss a bit about what drives the difference between each, what you can expect in your wine glass. It'll also include a tasting of each of the wines. Now, within the range, all of the wines will fall between a $20 and $30 price range. Hi, I'm Bob Paulinski, Master of Wine. Thank you very much for clicking on today's video. Over the last couple of months, I have been ultra Cabernet Sauvignon focused. I've had more than 200 through some work events and through some trade shows. I've selected 5 for this video to illustrate the difference between the various regions. This video will not include any discussion on Bordeaux. That's a big topic. That'll be coming on another day. Cabernet Sauvignon is the world's most widely planted wine grape variety with over 340,000 hectares. It's also a grape variety that hasn't been around all that long, dating back to only the 17th century. Through DNA testing about 3 decades ago, it was found that the parent vines were Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. While the origins link back to southwest France, its current day reach is global, with many of the world's top wines being produced by solo variety or sometimes having Cabernet Sauvignon as part of a blend. The thick berry skins tend to keep the fruit disease-free and provides for plenty of extraction. The wine styles can vary tremendously based on a range of factors like vineyard location, vine clone, vine age, and cropping levels. The wines tend to be deep, dense, with a good affinity to oak. Many bottlings have a great cellar potential, transforming themselves over a number of years with developed tertiary characteristics. First up is the 2020 Altaland Cabernet Sauvignon from the Salta province of Argentina. This wine is part of the Catina wine range, one of the top sources from that country. I picked this wine up at Total Wine for $20. Salta is the far northern part of Argentina, bordering Paraguay and Bolivia, providing some of the highest altitude vineyards in the world. While Malbec is far and away the leader from Argentina in terms of production and exports, Cabernet Sauvignon also plays a major role. It's the 3rd largest volume producing grape variety in Argentina. Now, in many places around the world, grape varieties, certainly Cabernet Sauvignon, benefits from some sort of moderating effect of a large body of water. Think of Bordeaux, many of the areas in Australia, certainly the coastal regions in California. All of these benefit the growing season. They extend the growing season. Therefore, oftentimes the wines will retain a good level of acidity. And because of the extended growing season, they end up with a phenolic ripeness. Now, with Argentina, it's a completely different story. Here we're talking about altitude. And with Salta, we're at extremely high altitude. In some cases, vineyards almost approaching 4,000 feet. So some of the very highest vineyards that you'll find anywhere in the world. Now, with Salta, it's also known for Malbec, of course, Torrontés. I'm a fan of the Cabernet Sauvignons from this area. I think they're really wonderful. They're very distinctive. And when you get the high altitude plantings, oftentimes you get wines that are very lean, they're focused, they have a refinement to them that you don't find in areas that are lower altitude that oftentimes can be much more warm. So in this case, you have a moderately deep red color. It's youthful, the color extends to the glass, but it's certainly not opaque. Also, the wines from this region tend to be more mid-range in alcohol content. This one clicks in at 13.5. The aroma on this is classic cab. You get that cassis, black fruit, blackberry characteristic, a little bit of a tobacco aroma as well, but very well defined, good purity, good intensity. It has some nice lift. There's some nice range to it. On the palate, really wonderful. Soft, round, good length. You feel the tannins a bit on the sides of your tongue, but the tannins are very refined. And as a point of comparison, if you think of some of the Chilean Cabernet just over the Andes into Chile, oftentimes Chilean Cab will show more of a grainy or grippy characteristic on the tannins. Most of the versions from Argentina are softer, rounder, more elegant, I think in many cases the tannins are much more finely integrated into the wine. But this is really a beautiful example, and for the price, outstanding. And Katina is just a rock solid source, no matter what you pick up from them. But this is one I highly recommend. Next up is the 2019 Bleasdale Mulberry Cabernet Sauvignon from Langhorne Creek in Australia. This is consistently one of the best value sources in the entire country. Regional wine shows are a big part of the Australian wine scene, and this one always does extremely well. It also sees a good amount of international distribution. I recently saw this wine in Quebec and also in Ontario for just over $22 Canadian. That's a great deal. In the US, it's generally around $20 per bottle. Not too many years back when I lived in Australia, Langhorne Creek was the go-to place for value. Now, it's about a 50-minute drive outside of Adelaide. It's an area that does get a good amount of coastal influence. And because of that, again, you get this long extended growing season. And with that, the grapes get full phenolic ripeness, and also the acidity is lifted. The wines from Langhorne Creek are never heavy handed. They're always good balance. Generally, the alcohol level is going to be around that 14% or so. And as is the case with just about everything from Australia, it's under a screw cap. Now, with Langhorne Creek Cab, the wines are never opaque. They're not ever overly extracted. They're not huge oak. They're not high alcohol. Uh, they really hit more of a refined, restrained style. And the color of this looks exactly as it should. It's quite deep at the core, certainly not opaque. There's a bit of fade at the rim of the glass as well, but it looks exactly as it should for a Cabernet Sauvignon that's a few years old. And the aroma. With Langhorne Creek, oftentimes you'll find a bit of a lifted mint characteristic. Violet character is also very common in these wines. Typical in many Cabernets, you'll find that black fruit, that blackberry characteristic, cassis, certainly all of that comes through, but it's that floral character, that lifted violet note, and also the mint characteristic that comes through. I mean, really pretty, beautiful aromatics, and quite expansive as well. On the palate, always very soft, very refined. You do get that nice acidity lift, keeps the wine very bright and fresh on the palate, and the tannins are very soft and there's good length. For not a lot of money, this is just a stunning wine, and it's been this way for many, many years. Here I have the 19. The 20 will be out in many other places around the world. It's excellent, and it's very consistent from vintage to vintage. So it's reliable. It's one of those old school classics. I love this wine, and it's very distinctive to its place. You won't find that eucalyptus character that you'll find in some regions in Australia. This is a little more subtle, a little bit more elegant and refined, but absolutely love this wine. If you've not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing it right now. Also, hit that like button and definitely hit the notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to speed on all things happening here. Next up is the 2020 Mercer Brothers Cabernet Sauvignon from the Horseheaven Hills AVA in Columbia Valley, Washington. This goes for about $20. Horseheaven Hills is in the south central part of the state. It's one of the larger wine producing regions there as well. The vast majority of the wines from Washington state are sourced east of the Cascade Mountains. This is essentially desert. It's always windy, hot during the growing season, quite cool at night. There's times when you can drive through this area and you'll see more tumbleweeds than cars. Now, specific to Mercer, it's a producer that's been around for a good number of years. They sell fruit to a number of growers, and they also make some wine. This is not one of the culty, high-profile producers. This is more of that rock-solid, steady, everyday source for good value. This 2020, I am hugely impressed with. The wines from this region are never over the top. They're not overly ripe, over extracted. They always have a good balance, nice nuance, some restraint. You'll notice the color on this, moderately deep. There's good intensity. It fades a bit out at the rim of the glass, but very typical of what you'll find with wines from this region. And the aroma, there's a baking spice character in this wine, and it's one of the distinctive markers that I find in Washington state. Some years ago, when I made my way through the MW program, I struggled mightily with identifying wines from Washington State. Oftentimes, I confuse them with some wines from Bordeaux. That baking spice characteristic is quite distinctive to Washington State. Also, the tannins tend to be more supple and round as well, especially when the wines are youthful. But very nice aromatics. You get that black fruit, that cassis character. It does have a bit of oak, but that baking spice character really does come through. On the palate, very good weight, round, kind of a hearty, big style red. One thing that you will not find in many Washington State wines, Cabernets that is a high level of pyrazine. It's that bell pepper or capsicum characteristic that you can sometimes find quite often in other places of the world. Generally in Washington State, you don't find that. And it's because the growing season is so long and the fruit gets very good phenolic ripeness. Generally, that pyrazine note is absent. But the wine is full, it's dense, there's good concentration to it. I tasted this wine a couple of months ago, and I've had it now twice since, this being the second time. I am hugely impressed with this wine. I think this is one of the better bottlings that Mercer has put out in a long time, maybe ever. But this is really rock solid, and if you can find it, it's definitely worth picking up. Next up is the 2022 Precision Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley, California. Typically, this sells for about $22. Costco is currently running a deal on this at $14.99 that runs through the middle of May. The prices for Napa Cabernet have been very steep in recent years. This one represents a very good value. Now, this is valley floor fruit, and much different than what you'll find with some of the hillside vineyards in Napa. The style of this wine tends to be more of a broad, plush, lush style. The fruit character is very, very forward. Tannins are also very soft. But for the value, I think this wine really does bring a lot to the table. Also, very heavy glass. Interesting. It's heavy glass with a deep punt, so really using a premium packaging on it. This is a very different style than the previous three cabs. This is made very overt. The fruit just jumps out of the glass. It's that dark cherry, that dark plum characteristic, blackberry, cassis, a little bit of oak, an extremely modern style, but it's all focused on that primary fruit character. A little bit of the secondary note from the smoky oak. Really smooth, very soft, true to form for Napa Valley. On the back palate, the tannins have a bit of a dusty characteristic, very common with wines from that part of the world. This is a modern style of cab, and I don't think this is a wine you want to keep very long. Even though it's a 22 vintage, it's something made for short-term consumption. It's solid, it's quite full, there's a lot going on in this glass, but if you like the style, it has a very overt fruit characteristic to it, really bright, fresh, good purity, this wine will be to your liking. Next up is the 2021 Triana Cabernet Sauvignon from Paso Robles, California. This goes for about $28. Paso is the midway point between San Francisco and Los Angeles. In terms of wine quality, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a region, certainly within California, that's improved more than Paso in recent years. It's also become one of the leaders in eco-friendly practices. Not too long ago, I wrote an article for Somm Journal. If you're interested in reading that, check. I'll put a link in the description down below. Now, in terms of the wines from Paso, generally, they are very full, dense, overt, quite concentrated. This is a warm growing area, and because of the warm region, oftentimes you'll find the fruit gets very ripe, there's a good density, generally some elevated alcohol as well. This one is coming in at 14.5. But the color density is really quite good. You look down in the core, not quite opaque, but there's certainly some good extraction, a little bit of fade as you get out to the rim. And the aroma, a little jammy. There's this raspberry dark fruit characteristic to it. The fruit intensity is very, very ripe. Sometimes with Paso wines, you'll find a little bit of a stewy or prune characteristic. This wine does not have any of that. Weighty, full, dense, good structure, solid integration of oak. I think with a wine like this, it's all based on style. If you like that type that's very broad and there's almost an intensity to it and a high level of ripeness. You'll find this wine to your liking. Triana gets some good distribution within the U.S. I don't know if this is being sold in export markets, but it's a very distinctive style based on the place of origin. The range of styles from Cabernet Sauvignon is very broad. I hope this video helped provide a little bit of guidance when you're out shopping for Cab Sauv. One of these days, I'm going to flip that cork over my shoulder and it's going to land in the bucket, but it's not today. Hey, I've got a lot of good, interesting wines to drink tonight. I think the Mercer is the one I'm going to have a bit of right now. I hope you're drinking something interesting as well, and please stop back again before too long. Cheers. Having my neighbors run a pooch for the day makes shooting the wine video a little more challenging. What do you think, Goof? Yeah, okay. All right.